Is the muse this external thing you draw on, or is it something that you call from like a deep sacred space, within?
It's a great question. Where does inspiration come from? Where does it live? How does it happen?
Yes.
What is writing? We don't even know what that process actually evokes. So inspiration just arrives in a flash, in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes it can, in my experience, it can come as a very soft nudge, or it can be a loud bang, or it can be a flood that, washes my whole way of thinking around. I love that talk by Elizabeth Gilbert. I used it often in my writing retreats, actually, in Norway. And first, one of the things I really love is that this idea that the genius just arrives, shows up for work when I show up. And as you say, when it's some kind of old dude sitting in the corner somewhere, it doesn't become such an ego issue. It's not me.
Mm.
But somehow I am I'm able to put the plug into the wall and switch on the right buttons. And how does that happen? I mean, really, I don't know. For me, I think what's happening right now, at this stage I'm sort of feeling a bit of a crunch of pressure. Feels like the hourglass has sand running very fast. And I'm like going, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what's important? What's the truth? How to access an honest voice? Is this the genius that Elizabeth Gilbert refers to? Is it the voice that kind of knows, sees from the far-seeing place, which is the way Stephen King describes the muse? I think it's a fabulous description. In his book on writing, he doesn't need a view out of his writing room and gongs and dolphin sounds. He just goes down to his basement and sits facing a blank wall and looks into the far-seeing place in himself. And I love that. This idea of the genius being some kind of external force, like electricity. You don't see it like the internet. It's a field force, a force field that you can just tap into. So how to create the technology in oneself to be able to tap in.
Yes, so that's actually the next point. So what does that infrastructure look like for you?
How does it look like?
Is just showing up a big part of the process? And then, I assume it's a bit like, as someone who's not that great at tapping into the muse just yet, how much of it is muscle memory? How much of it is years of being still, being quiet, meditating, almost programming yourself to listen to the sound. I'm reading the BFG to the kids, and there's this wonderful part where he explains to Sophie that he can hear the dreams. They're beyond our ears, but he can hear them, that fine tuning. Have you been laying the foundation for years to be able to tap into this field?
I don't think consciously.
Mm.
And I certainly didn't have a mother who read those kind of stories to me. I think it's a call.
Mm.
It's just a call that anyone can hear. It's like a dog barking on the neighboring property. You either listen to it or you ignore it.
Mm.
So there's some calls to ignore and there's some calls to listen to. So, for example, I have an inner alarm clock that goes off at 4 a.m. It's connected to that call. And it demands that I get up and show up for work.
Merle, I found a quote by Eric Clapton. I mean, who doesn't love a quote by Eric Clapton? It says, "I wish I could write easily. I'm one of those guys who's visited by the muse when things are dire." And I think, anyone in the creative kind of process can relate to writer's block or that stuck feeling or that desperation that kind of creeps up on you when there's a deadline or when someone's chasing you or when you feel like you've been staring at the blank page, day after day. What do you think about that, the concept that the muse only shows up or we're only called to her when we're stuck? It's kind of the same thing for some people who turn to prayer or meditation when things are hard. Do you think the muse only pops onto our windowsill during the bad times, or is she patiently sitting there waiting for us all day, every day? Yes.
It's an interesting question you ask. First of all, to go back to Eric Clapton, I'm not sure what he means by dire, because you interpret it as some kind of pressure, writing pressure. I interpret it as suffering, that when he suffers, that's when he's able to access his most creative self, and he almost needs that pressure of suffering, of dire. I think certainly when we suffer, we access a part of the longing to connect that feels more available than when we're busy rushing around and life is happening.
Yes, it feels almost
busy pace.
Sorry, I was going to say, it feels almost like when things are going well, we are the creative genius. And then when things are tough, it's easier to resort to the needing to call on that external support. Or
exactly. Where are you?
Yes.
How can I access this? So the intensity is ramped up when things are dire in our lives. There's a whole view, and I think Elizabeth Gilbert really embodies this, that it's much more fun and just as powerful to access the muse, the genius of the muse, when we're happy and fulfilled and ecstatic. And I mean, the mystic poets, they wrote their poetry, Kabir, Hafiz, Rumi, they wrote out of ecstasy. Whereas you take Hemingway, had to have 5 whiskeys and get smashed in order to access his muse, which he did so brilliantly. So somewhere in between this, we have to find what works for us. And that takes patience, and it takes a degree of diligence and tenacity. Because I've been writing now, my writing practice, getting up at 4 a.m., probably for 50 years, maybe. Wow. When my children were small. That was my only quiet time of the day. And in my circadian rhythm, I'm very awake in the morning and absolutely horrifically rubbish at night. I'm a pain to be around. So I love the early to bed, early to rise rhythm, which doesn't always fit in the whole social world, but for me it works. So I think that's a really important thing, to find when your creative time of your rhythm is and to follow that and to create a practice out of it. What is a practice? It means showing up, saying to that muse the way Elizabeth Gilbert does in that. But yeah, I've shown up for work. Where are you? Very often there's nothing. And it's like any athlete. It's an Olympic event, writing. It's athletic. But sometimes there's nothing, and sometimes there's huge resistance. And then I love Rumi's poem when he says, don't go back to sleep. I've things to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. I've written a whole chapter of that in my memoir because it's such a valuable lesson. So I also had a therapist in Toronto, an amazing guy I worked with, who used to say, do whatever it takes. And I love that. Just do whatever it takes. If it means, a second cup of coffee or music or poetry or candles or mantras or prayers or banging the pillow, or just do whatever it takes to help get the mind, the heart, the spirit into a writing frame. And if there's nothing, then write about the nothing. Write about that. Because it's as we attune to what's showing up, it has the ability to become more. Sometimes starts as a very, very soft presence. In fact, Virginia Woolf writes about this. She says it's a very subtle shift from nothing to something. And I love that because there's subtlety, it's levels of engagement. Writing it's a meditation, it's an art, it's a dance, it's a game, it's suffering, as who was it? Is it Hemingway who says you have to sit at your typewriter and bleed?
Definitely feels like that.
It's all of it, because it's all of life. It's the chaos, it's the happiness, the confusion. It's a quagmire, it's a jungle. And the monkey mind in the jungle is shouting in a million languages and saying, in every voice we've ever heard, every teacher's voice, parental, cultural, in all languages. It's all coming at us. And the amazing thing about writing, I think, is that little pen has a sharp nib at the end. And only one little voice can come through at a time. And so the cacophony, it gets filtered and refined and refined. I'm not speaking from the perspective of being a great writer. I wish I was, but I'm aspiring to it. And whether I get there or not is beside the point, because writing is my practice.